Oil prices surge as tensions in the Middle East escalate. Japan's new Prime Minister jolts markets, and Turkey's Technofest takes off in the southern city of Adana. Hello, I'm Taiba Aydin and you're watching Money Talks. Oil prices further rose on Friday, trading at a 4-week high as investors weighed the prospect of a wider Middle East conflict disrupting crude supplies. Up to 4% of the global oil supply is now at risk due to the escalating tensions between Israel and Iran, following the killing of Hezbollah leader Hasan Nasrallah in Lebanon last week. Analysts warn that further disruptions could push prices back up to $100 per barrel, significantly affecting global markets. Iran, the third largest OPEC oil producer, supplies almost 4 million barrels per day. Israel's retaliation to Iran's attacks on Tel Aviv and the possibility of further military action against Iranian oil infrastructure increase the risk of supply disruptions. Global benchmark Brent rose to more than $78 a barrel, while the US West Texas Intermediate climbed to more than $74 a barrel. Market observers have moved from geopolitical risk fatigue to seeing a real threat of oil shortages. US production increases and sputtering Chinese demand are also affecting oil prices, but Middle East tensions are now a key factor. The US is discussing whether it would support Israeli strikes on Iran's oil facilities as retaliation for Tehran's missile attack on Israel, while Israel continues to hit Beirut with new airstrikes. For more, I'm joined by Osama Rizvi. He's an energy and economic analyst at Primary Vision. Thanks for being with us, Osama. Now, up until now, there hadn't been any significant impact of this war on oil prices. But how could further escalation between Israel and Iran disrupt global oil supplies?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me today. Secondly, there are 2 or 3 scenarios in which this can play out. As of today, the world has a sufficient amount of oil floating around. If you look recently at the US inventories, they increased by 4 million barrels per day, which was the largest increase in the past 22 weeks. Similarly, hedge fund and money managers have still amassed, gathered net selling positions. Wells Fargo, Citibank, Goldman all see an oversupply in 2025. And that is one of the reasons I believe that if there is no further escalation, we might not see a further surge in oil prices. Definitely, oil prices won't touch $100 even if there is a further surge because of the very fact that the world has sufficient oil. Secondly, the oil demand is not to the mark. We see weaknesses in the Chinese markets. We see weakness in the Eurozone manufacturing sector. The recent figures by the Institute of Supply Managers Index, the ISM index, manufacturing index in the US, it shows that the US manufacturing contracted for the 7th straight month. And there is a lot of pressure building up on the consumers as well, with savings falling and credit card debt soaring. So I believe all of these, they make a case where I don't see oil prices surging beyond 85. However, that said, there might be temporary spikes beyond that in extreme cases, unfortunately, in the case of an all-out war, but still that would be temporary and oil prices will fall. Moving into 2025, oil has more downside than the upside.
Right, and Israel is currently weighing the prospect of attacking key oil infrastructures in Iran. What kind of ramifications could this have on global oil supplies?
Well, the global oil supply can be disrupted, but I think that cannot happen, or that might not happen, because of the fact that US has election and the consumers, as I just said, are facing a lot of pressure, fiscal pressures, and it would be the interest of the US to intervene and keep this, hostilities, the exchange of hostilities under control, because in case of further oil price increase, we might see the US consumer getting affected, which will eat into the political capital of either parties. So that would not be the interest of the broader political domain in the US. And I hope and I pray that this does not happen.
Right, and now with both benchmarks rising, both Brent crude and WTI have gained about 9% this week. How should global markets prepare for potential supply shortages?
Well, In the shorter run, I do not see any potential supply shortage. We also need to look at the fact that the spare capacity in the OPEC is at its highest point, more than 5 million barrels per day. So, because of the production cuts, ongoing production cuts. So, in case, even if there is an oil supply disruption, the spare capacity can kick in. The Saudi Arab, the OPEC producers can act as the swing producers and stabilize the markets. So, I believe that this is going to happen, and the markets and the traders and the global sentiment is showcasing such a scenario.
And how significant is Iran's role as a key OPEC producer in the context of this conflict?
Well, as you just mentioned, Iran is the second largest oil producers amongst the OPEC members. Recently, we also saw that Iran's oil exports touched, 3-4 years high. And even if there is no physical disruption to the markets due to the ongoing developments, the sentiment side definitely plays its role. And we can see the paper markets. So there are two sides of the markets, right? The one is the physical markets. The second is the paper markets. So at times, paper markets they act on sentiments, and any disruption, any chances of a disruption from Iran's oil supply can shoot up the prices. That can play out really bad, specifically for the developing part of the world, which depends upon, their imports for their energy. And given the fact that we have amassed around $315 trillion of public debt, most of it in the developing part of the world, that can produce a lot of political and social risks as well.
Okay, Osama Rizvi, energy and economic analyst at Primary Vision. We'll have to leave it there. Thank you very much for your analysis.
Thank you so much.
The scale of Israel's ground assault on Lebanon, alongside its crippling air campaign, is sending waves of panic through Beirut. Priyanka Navani reports from the capital.
The Israeli army released these videos of its soldiers preparing for a ground raid into Lebanon. A short while later, they say they went in what would be Israel's fourth invasion of the sovereign state of Lebanon, its last incursion being in 2006. It's a claim Hezbollah disputes, but one that was enough to instill more fear in an already panicked population. But there are few options available to the mounting number trying to leave.
There is no flight available, So before, let's say right now, like we are the 1st of October, before 15th of October, there is no available flight out of Beirut.
At the Syrian border, thousands are fleeing every day. The trip takes time and is growingly risky due to recent airstrikes. Taxis from Beirut can cost more than $500 for a family of 4. Some travel companies are even offering buses through Syria to Jordan. The journey is long, but the demand is high.
From the first day, I got more than 100 calls. And the first day, we booked more than 50 people. They need to travel. And daily, we are getting more and more and more and more.
But for many in Lebanon, the economic crisis means leaving isn't an option. At grocery stores, there are signs of people stocking up on essentials.
Very big numbers in purchases, such as instant noodles, such as Indomie especially. Bread, for example, the days where they had the airstrikes at Dahieh, the bread was like gone in minutes. People are getting a lot of canned food more.
But even stocking up is a luxury to some, particularly the thousands living on the street in the face of what Lebanon's prime minister has said could be the largest displacement crisis in the country's history, with 1 million people living in limbo, including the family of 5 now living in their van after having been displaced from the southern suburbs on Friday.
I have no battery in my phone and I can't shower. I just wash with water from the sea. It's been 3 days that we're living in the van. Good people are distributing food for us.
The scale of need here in Lebanon ranges. Some people are desperate for a ticket out, others only for a can of tuna. The common thread is that everybody believes that this war is going to take time and know that the only way through it is going to be together. Priyanka Navani, TRT World in Beirut.
To the occupied West Bank now, and ongoing violence against Palestinians and a restriction of permits to work in Israel is pushing the economy to the brink of collapse. It's personal for many families whose breadwinners are left with no choice but to risk everything to find ways to feed their families. Céline Toutar has the story.
In the occupied West Bank, a struggle for survival unfolds. The economy is failing, and the situation is growing desperate. Jobs are scarce, and families have no choice but to seek work across the barrier in Israel, despite being banned from working there since October 7th. But crossing is not easy or safe. Every day, Palestinians make the harrowing journey for the promise of a job. Some hide in trucks, others slip through the holes in the barbed wire fence. If caught, they could be arrested or shot, like Allah's brother.
After October 7th, it became difficult to enter Israel. They prevented workers from the occupied West Bank from entering. There is no work here. He was unemployed, yet he has to deal with the living costs. He has a family and responsibilities. He has to go work in Israel because in the occupied West Bank, there are no opportunities. He had to go for work.
The World Bank warns that the occupied West Bank's economy may soon collapse. More than 300,000 workers have left the labor market, and the businesses there cannot survive. Roads and infrastructure have been destroyed by raids. Water and electricity networks are gone.
These raids and procedures by the Israelis resulted in destruction of infrastructure, roads, water networks, electricity networks, and destruction of houses. I mean the destruction of the economic infrastructure. It makes the environment in those districts not an acceptable form of existence.
The situation has only worsened since October 7th. The occupied West Bank's unemployment rate has skyrocketed to 32%. In the occupied East Jerusalem's Old City, more than 80% of businesses have closed their doors.
There are more than 200,000 Palestinian workers that stopped working from inside Israel. This is a fact and the result of the inability of the private sector to operate its institutions. It is working at less than 50% efficiency.
More than 700 Palestinians have been killed in the occupied West Bank since the war began. The violence will continue, and thus Palestinians are left with a difficult choice: stay and suffer, or risk their lives for a chance to provide for their families. They will keep crossing despite dangers. It's a journey they must make, even if it may be their last. Selin Tutar, TRT World.
Japanese stocks surged on Thursday as new Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba said economic conditions in the country don't currently support another rate hike. That sent the yen plummeting, helping boost export-heavy companies. Ishiba was sworn in on Tuesday after becoming the head of the leading Liberal Democratic Party. He's promised to work on the economy's multiple challenges, including low consumer spending and growth. Emre Boz reports.
Shigeru Ishiba is hereby nominated as Prime Minister of Japan.
And shortly after, a round of applause. As new president, one of Ishiba's main goals is to prop up consumer spending in the country. Household spending in Japan has largely been in the negative since the beginning of the year. One way he'll try to achieve this is by advocating a raise to the minimum wage. He believes this will boost consumption by giving more people income to spend and improve economic growth. But analysts say this may make inflation even worse. The rate of price rises in the country has continued to climb since the start of the year, reaching 3% in August. Ishiba says he plans to raise taxes on corporations. This is to fund defense spending and ensure the government pays off its growing debt levels, climbing to more than 250% of GDP. Critics point to higher corporate taxes as potentially reducing investment in the country. It's because they make returns from investments much lower, deterring investors and slowing down economic growth. Ishiba's focus is on improving domestic demand and removing debt. By removing debt, he believes the government will have more for public spending and investment. And Ishiba's primary goal is to make sure the country doesn't go back to its 25-year-long deflation period, where spending remained low and investor sentiment pessimistic.
We will pursue fiscal policy that puts highest priority on ending deflation. As the first step, we will compile a package of measures to ease pain on households from rising prices.
Moving forward, Ishiba has also called for early elections in October, pledging more economic growth and expansion. So it's a game of wait and see to find out whether his policies are approved by the people of Japan. Emre Boz, TRT World.
For more, let's bring in Axel Bosski in Florence, Italy. He's an executive committee board member at the European-Japan Advancement Research Network. Thanks for being with us, Axel. Now, firstly, what are Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba's main economic goals?
Hello, good afternoon to you. Thank you for having me. Well, he has just announced or he ordered his cabinet to adopt an economic stimulus package today. As you said in your reporting, in order to stimulate the economy, adopting the usual, and we have seen this many times before, loose monetary and fiscal policies to stimulate growth, and then in order to as you said, to raise wages, and to boost private consumption. This is not the first time this has been done. Japan has tried that many times before. The problem is that wages did not really rise over the last 25 years. And he also announced to raise the minimum wage to 1,500 yen, which is roughly $10. It's a good idea, but it's much easier said than done because so far previous attempts to get Japan's companies to raise wages have been very unsuccessful. It's a long story. This private consumption is too low and needs to be increased. Yes, it is necessary, but it really remains to be seen whether this, economic stimulus package is going to be different than the one he or LDP-led governments have adopted in the past. I'm very skeptical.
And as you mentioned, Ishiba has asked his cabinet to formulate an economic relief package to ease the bite of inflation. What kind of support measures can we expect to see?
Well, this is something that has been announced, since he became LDP party president. Subsidies or additional subsidies for local governments, cash handouts for low-income households, to help households to deal with higher energy bills, and then of course the idea to raise the minimum wage. So he's making the right noises, but it really remains yet to be seen because like I said, this is not the first time, but this is really good old or bad old, if you will, Japanese economic policies. Basically, monetary easing will continue, fiscal stimulus will continue, interest rates, or the Bank of Japan's interest rates will remain very, very low. They're standing at 0.25% now, when you compare this with Europe or the US, which is between 4 and 5%. There you go. So it's cash handouts, which might help him to gain votes for the elections at the end of October. But it's nothing really new. It has been done before with a very limited success.
Right, and with plans to raise corporate taxes to fund defense and reduce debt, there's concerns about deterring investment. How does Ishiba plan to mitigate the risk while still achieving his fiscal goals?
Yeah, exactly. And you point to a very important problem. If you raise, and that remains to be seen because he hasn't talked about this today or yesterday, but he has done this, like you said, last week. If you raise corporate tax, and if you not only raise corporate tax but also capital gain tax, this is not helping to companies. This is not incentivizing companies to raise wages. It would be doing the opposite. So what you see today is that the raising capital gain taxes, which will lead to further export of capital, which then would further lead to yen become even cheaper, and it already is very, very cheap as compared to the euro and the dollar. It would have the opposite effect. So you want to create, more private consumption. Okay, on the one hand. On the other hand, then you announce, like it has been done, to raise corporate taxes. This is not. This doesn't make much sense yet.
All right, interesting analysis there, Axel Bosski from the European-Japan Advancement Research Network. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
On the eve of Tunisia's presidential elections, the economic crisis remains a top priority for most voters. Candidates haven't outlined viable solutions that could ease social tensions. Experts told TRT World that protests are likely to continue. Bassam Bounaini has more from Tunis.
A gloomy autumn in Tunisia. Prices are exponentially outpacing incomes, with millions of people struggling to make ends meet. Inflation decreased slightly to 7%, but it topped 26% when it came to food. As per the poverty rate, it exceeds 16.5%. At the largest market in Tunis, the deterioration of purchasing power is being felt.
People can't afford most of the goods. Wages don't change while prices keep rising.
Customers are complaining, and so I do, as a vendor. Everything is interconnected.
Everything is available, but prices are out of control. If the president cannot contain them, we have to work hard to make it.
One of the major failures of the successive governments since 2011's popular uprising that unseated longtime President Zine al-Abidine Ben Ali is the economy. The presidential election campaign has been devoid of any real promises or visions that could bring some stability to the country.
The economic crisis has worsened and the gap between the political transition and the economic one has deepened. This has had an impact on people's lives. The Tunisian people have lost the willingness to make any change compared to 2011.
As there is no relief in sight, anti-austerity movements are likely to continue.
Public services, including health, education and transportation, have deteriorated. These sectors could witness continuous waves of protests and encourage social stakeholders to take to the streets. The amount of protests is still huge. Protesters are trying to convey their demands under the current situation.
Fitch Ratings upgraded Tunisia to CCC+, but the agency still has doubts on the North African nation's ability to overcome its economic plight. Bassam Bounani, TRT World, Tunis.
For many kids and grown-up kids, Turkey's Technofest is one of the highlights of the year. It's the world's largest aerospace, aviation and technology festival. There are plenty of games, activities and competitions, including riding in simulators and building vertical landing rockets. TRT World's İlyas Avcı is in the southern city of Adana and sent us this report.
Technofest, the world's largest aerospace, aviation and technology festival, has opened its doors for the 10th time this year, and this time in Adana in southern Turkey.
Distinguished guests, esteemed stakeholders, valued members of the press, and dear young people who will become the protectors of an independent Turkey and the architects of a just world, I am deeply honored to welcome you to Technofest Mediterranean, a key milestone in Turkey's technological journey, here in Adana.
Technofest is the world's largest aerospace, aviation and technology festival. This year it brings its thrilling shows, activities and competitions to Adana in South Turkey. And this edition is called the Champions League and brings together past winners to compete in fresh challenges.
This year, there are competitions in 50 main categories, and they vary from vertical landing, rocket building, and financial technologies to bioengineering innovations.
The main goal of Technofest is for students to be involved in the work in a fun way, like developing rockets, rather than through game-like methods, and for them to start at a young age. This is one of the most important steps for the future of our country. The fact that people of all ages, young and old, can see these achievements adds a special hope and a unique flavor to this field of technology.
Youth from all ages come together once again to take part in these challenges.
In Technofest, there's lots of different projects and they are absolutely amazing. We are able to see the projects and maybe think on them, give opinion to make better on them or make better yours. And there's lots of also performance over there and it's absolutely amazing.
With highlights including the first public flights of Baykar's Bayraktar TB3 and TAI's Anka 3, Technofest promises 3 more days of thrilling technology and innovation. İlyas Avcı, TRT World, Adana.
And if you have any stories you'd like our reporters to look into or any questions for our experts, you can reach out to us on X at TRT Money Talks. Well, that is all from Money Talks for now. From me and the whole team here in Istanbul, thanks for watching. Goodbye.